In art and design, scale is the size of an element or form seen in relation to other elements or forms within a given format. Scale is based on proportional relationships between and among forms. In general, scale is best understood considering the size of visual elements in relation to other parts of a design. A designer uses scale to relate our understanding of the relative size of real objects, such as the size of a human being, in contrast to that of a giraffe. Through our experiences of the natural world like this, we expect elements to maintain a particular scale. When a designer plays with our expectations of scale, distorting it as we would ordinarily see it in nature, then the result can seem surreal or fantastic. And along with utilizing fundamental principles, designers will control scale for the following reasons. Manipulating scale can lead to visual variety in a composition. Scale adds contrast, dynamism, and positive tension to relationships between and among shapes and forms. Competent manipulation of scale can create the illusion of three-dimensional space. Proportion is the comparative size relationships of parts to one another and to the whole. Elements of a design or parts of a design are compared to the whole in terms of magnitude, measure, and/or quantity. For example, the size relationships between common objects, such as a tennis racket and a tennis ball. A viewer expects there to be one scale for a particular object and a relative or proportional scale for another. This expectation implies standard relationships between elements, such that if a designer varies from the norm or the standard, then another element to whole relationship will vary in the same manner. When the viewer's expectations are intentionally challenged, the designer creates visual surprises, potentially surreal solutions, or disjunctive appearances. For designers and artists, there is an additional implied meaning to scale and proportion, and that is an aesthetic arrangement, a harmonious or agreeable relationship of parts or elements within a whole, where balance exists leading to harmony. And in graphic design, harmony is agreement within a composition, where elements are constructed, arranged, and function in relation to one another to an agreeable effect. This can be emphasized with variations in scale and relationships through proportion. So, scale is an intrinsic part of art and design. A printed piece can be as small as a postage stamp or as large as a billboard. Logos must be read at a tiny size and from a great distance, whilst films can be viewed on huge screens or handheld devices. Most projects are designed to be reproduced at multiple scales while others are conceived for a single site or medium. No matter what size a work will ultimately be, it retains its own intrinsic sense of scale. And what do designers mean by scale? Scale can be considered both objectively and subjectively. In objective terms, it refers to the literal dimensions of a physical object or to the literal correlation between a representation and the real thing it depicts. Printed maps have an exact scale. An increment of measure on the page represents an increment in the physical world. Scale models recreate relationships found in full-scale objects. So a model car closely approximates the features of a working vehicle, while a toy car plays with size relationships, inflating some elements while diminishing others. Subjectively, scale refers to the viewer's impression of an object's size. A book or a room, for example, might have a grand or intimate scale, reflecting how it relates to our own existence and to our knowledge of other books and other rooms. We say that an image or a representation lacks scale when it has no cues that connect it to lived experience, giving it a physical identity. A design whose elements all have similar size or scale often feels dull and static, lacking contrast. Scale can depend on context. An ordinary piece of paper can contain lettering or images that seem to burst off its edges, conveying a surprising sense of scale. Likewise, a small isolated element can punctuate a large surface, drawing importance from the vast space surrounding it. Scale is entirely relative. As we've discussed, proportions illustrate changes in scale between objects and often exist in a ratio. For instance, an element might be double or half the size of another. A graphic element can appear larger or smaller depending on the size, placement, and the colour of elements around it. When elements are all the same size, designs can fall flat. Contrast of scale can create a sense of tension as well as a feeling of depth and movement. Small shapes tend to appear to be receding, large ones appear to be moving forward. We expect some objects to be of a particular scale in relation to one another. Playing with those proportional and ratioed relationships can create spatial illusions and visually interesting conceptual relationships.